Today on Substance Stories, we're going to be talking about the drama triangles we get caught up in and how they can hold back our recovery. Annie, it is fantastic to have you back, and we're going to talk about something you're passionate about, I'm passionate about. We're going to talk about the systems that prolongate our addiction and can actually make us have poor mental health in general. So the system particularly we're talking about is sort of what I know you like to call drama triangles, perhaps from a more sort of psychological, academic view. People might say sort of Bowen's Family Systems triangles, but the triangles of drama in our life that we can get caught up in. And what does that mean, Annie?
Yeah, so there are a few different theories that we can talk about in terms of how our family relationships can really influence us as individuals and how that can then impact our recovery or becoming addicted to a substance. So when we talk about a family system, it's the way that we are emotionally connected in a system with our family and how those relationships really impact us.
It's important when we get stuck in this is some people, family members or patients can say, oh, we're blaming, it's not, we're not trying to blame anyone in that system. It's just more that the system itself isn't working. So I remember, sometimes we can be in a system where our role in that system is the golden child, or our role in that system is the fuck up, right? And the family unit is more comfortable when that is the case. Or it doesn't need to be a family; it can be a friendship group. I remember I was once talking to a patient who said to me of his parents, I only ever see them when I'm unwell. When I'm well, I can't get their attention, but when I'm unwell, they're always around, because that was the narrative and the system that his family had set up, was that he was the black sheep. And so it didn't match the system. And so even though his parents, of course, they loved him and wanted him to be well, on another level, they were uncomfortable with him being well. And what do we do when we identify a sort of system like that is unhelpful for us?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a few ways that we can kind of identify that. And there's one that we call, like you mentioned before, it's a drama triangle, where essentially we take on these roles in our family system or in a triangle. The role usually taken on by the person who is addicted to a substance, they would identify as the victim. And so it's a role that they're taking on. And then we might have some other roles in that triangle, such as a persecutor and a rescuer. So this dynamic that we continue to find ourselves in is that we're in a victim role and we seek a rescuer, and we may also have a persecutor in our lives. And despite the fact that we might want to get out of this victim role, the persecutor and the rescuer in our life keep us quite firmly situated as the victim. And that can also often happen in other aspects where, like you said, you may be the black sheep of the family. And if you are in that position in your family, or you're the scapegoat, and people in that system are placing blame on you, or there's a lot of anxiety within the system, and you are the person holding all of that anxiety, it's a really useful system for the family. It functions despite the fact that if you are that person, you're not having a very good time. And if you then decide to engage with a recovery program, or you start to make changes, or you start to set boundaries in your life, that disrupts the system. So everyone else who has kind of relied on you being quite firmly placed in this role, it can fall apart. And so just like you said, referencing that patient of yours where the parents would kind of only be around or show their love or affection or be supportive when he was unwell or they were unwell. And when they're starting to push against that system by getting better, they no longer feel their role is useful. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think actually we all experience this. So I don't know if anyone's ever caught up with, say, like school friends they haven't seen in a long time, and the same sort of dynamics will play out no matter what's happened in between. So, or if someone might go away and live overseas and then feel weird settling back into their old friendship group when they've returned from overseas, because that same dynamic, that what was in that group before you went away comes back, but you might have gone on your own personal growth journey, but the dynamics of the social circle won't fit in that growth journey, because that's not what that social circle. So it's not like that anyone in that sort of victim, perpetrator, her rescuer dynamic wants something bad to happen to the person who is the victim in that situation. It's just the sort of subconscious desire we all have for everyone to fit into the mold. We want things to fit into their little boxes, and we just get uncomfortable if the apple cart is thrown over. So let's say, Annie, I have an addiction and I'm in this victim role, and this is how I relate to a lot of my friends and loved ones. You see it a lot, actually, I would say, is in marriages. In relationships where one partner has an addiction and the other partner is the policeman. And so, and then it almost becomes a games of cops and robbers of how do I secretly engage in my addiction. You just want to say to the policeman, stop policing, and the robber will stop being sneaky. We're playing this dynamic out. So let's say I have an addiction. I've identified with you, Annie, that I'm in the victim role. I've gone to a wonderful rehab where you work, and I'm changing my. What do I do? Do I move away? Do I go for the location cure where I just move state or country for a bit and let the dynamic reset, or is there a way to approach these people in my life who I love and don't want to say goodbye to and reset that?
It's such a good question, and a really difficult one for people to consider, because I think it's different for everyone and how interconnected they are with their families. The emotional charge that your family system might have on you and your sort of differentiation of self um, can impact whether or not you're able to remove yourself emotionally from your family. And, I guess the short answer would be, for some people, yes, you might need to literally relocate yourself, or be out of that relationship, whether that's for a short time or a long time. Um, but I think it's a lot less simple than just remove yourself. I think there's another way that you can shift or remove yourself from that triangle or from that victim role, is at what we call the empowerment triangle. So rather than the drama triangle of being the victim, flip it, and you become a creator, essentially, of your own choices, your own life, your own decisions. And instead of seeking a rescuer or a persecutor in your life, you may need to seek somebody who is more of a challenger and a coach. So rather than a rescuer to do things for you, you find a coach who will help support you and help maybe create the scaffolding, or, as a coach would, they're not going to play the match for you, but they're going to stand on the sidelines supporting you. And rather than a persecutor who's just going to criticize and tell you off and be the policeman, you find a challenger in your life. So that might look like a sponsor, or it might look like, a friend, or someone who's going to keep you accountable for attending the gym or going to, run club, or going to meetings. And so it might look like changing that triangle, which does mean seeking people who can be those roles for you. Or it might look like, I just have to be all of this for myself. And that does feel like a lot to take on. But, with the right tools and going to a really good, facility where we teach these kinds of things, you can learn some of the skills and some of the psychoeducation in order to try and make the change for yourself, to remove yourself from that victim role.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said sponsor, because I was just about to say the same thing. I think that coach role is exactly what the sponsor would be. And bizarrely, what I was also thinking, when we rewrite our narrative, someone who is fantastically good at that is Donald Trump. It's an odd person to bring up, but he is constantly writing the narrative he lives in perhaps an unhealthy manner, like only a narcissist can. But I think we can learn a lot from how we will fulfill the narrative set out, and that whether that's the role we are playing in this thing, and how we flip that up is we write the narrative ourselves. So Donald Trump is always saying, I'm going to win the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm going to do this. If the narrative we tell about ourselves is that we are on this road to recovery and we are setting up a system around ourselves to reflect that, then we will do that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when we're in recovery, or when we're recovering from anything, addiction, mental illness, physical illness, we need to tell that narrative that we are on that road. I always compare it to Superman and Clark Kent versus Batman and Robin. So Batman and Bruce Wayne. So Superman is Superman who dresses up to be Clark Kent, where Batman is Bruce Wayne who dresses up to be Batman. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think when we're in recovery, we need to be Superman. And if occasionally we have a relapse and we're Clark Kent, that is very different. We are still Superman. We are still the narrative we are as we are in recovery, and occasionally we have a relapse or a lapse. If our narrative is that we are in addiction and occasionally we get to be Batman, we get to be in recovery, I think we're doomed. So the narrative we tell about ourselves is so important, and we can push that narrative on our surroundings as well. Mm-hmm. We can say, I'm no longer the victim. I'm empowered in this role, and that's what I expect of my friends and my surroundings, and we'll get there.
Absolutely. And I think, sometimes that narrative can be written for us based on our family histories and our family systems as well. So we can have that narrative, and it might not even really be ours, but that's what we've sort of grown up with. That's what we've been grown up around, and that can be really tricky to differentiate from and go, actually, what is my story, rather than what have I inherited, from, whether it's modeling from your parents or a projection from your parents' own stresses and trauma, or did I experience things in my childhood because of, the things and the ways that I was brought up, or is there historical trauma throughout the generations of my family, or not even trauma, but there could just be generational addiction, and that's sort of a narrative that's written throughout your ancestry.
And not even family, friends, school. Mm-hmm. These narratives are told about us all throughout our life, and we get to decide which ones apply to us, and we get to decide which one we're going to let stick around. And so I think when we're in recovery, it's really important that we are setting the narrative we want. We are looking at our social system around us and making sure that reflects what we want and where we want to be going. Thank you so much, Annie. It was wonderful to have you back on. What a pleasure to be back.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.